Welcome everyone to the Jive with Dr. Jivi Show on a Friday afternoon. Yay, the weekend is coming. Today we are here with a lovely, lovely friend, Jenna Forster, and I'm super excited to have her on the show, and we're going to talk all about power, 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 and taking back the power. Welcome to the show, Jenna.
Thank you, Jivi. I'm so excited to be here. I am truly one of your biggest fans.
Aw, I love you.
I just love it. Yeah, I love it. I love it. I'm really happy to be here. And one of the interesting things about power is I've made a huge switch in my life with that word. Where I came from in my past, the direction of power, I come from a totally different place. So I'm really happy to have this conversation with you around that.
Ah, love it, love it. So, Jenna, let's get right into it. Let's just start with that word. Like, when I think of power, I think of a very delegated, assertive, push forward kind of a word. So, walk me through your journey of what you thought power was and what you now think power is.
Absolutely. So, one of the things in my younger years, about 20-something years ago, I was fortunate enough to rise in the ranks at a corporation rather quickly, and I loved the organization I worked for, but I was young. I was female, and I was young, and everyone that worked for me, except for one person, was older than me, and I was managing a department, so I felt like I had to be powerful in the name of the word, that, like you said, that coming at something, moving forward, really drive. I was the bull in the china shop. I remember my boss saying to me, Jenna, you can't delegate upward. I was just always, going for it and trying to prove. I spent my younger years working in corporate America, really trying to prove who I was and trying to prove that I was enough and good enough. And I gained a sense of power from that because I was successful in what I was doing. So I felt powerful, if you will. What I've now learned is true power really comes from a personal expression of energy to go in a direction. One of the things that we'll probably dive into is how I switched from trying to control and having a sense of power that wasn't truly who I was to having a sense of power now, really about all of my power, everything about me bringing forward into what I do. So I think it's a really interesting place, especially as women, to come from.
Jenna, what was that trigger point where you walk me through, you have this definition of power and you're living that life, something happens, and then you're like, oh, I guess that wasn't the definition of power. Walk me through what happened.
Yeah, so it was about 9 years ago. And I had shifted out of corporate America. I was an executive coach, and I was working in that realm. I was sitting on a lot of boards. I was leading a lot of things. I was really a go-getter, if you will, just sort of run off my feet, trying to be a lot of different things for a lot of different people. And then all of a sudden, my health left me. So, you know my story, I believe, Jivi, but I was literally running down a trail, a local trail, and my left leg went out from under me and I lost the use of my leg. And I progressed over the next 3-4 years into quite a place of ill health. I didn't know it at the time, but I had Lyme disease. So I was bit by a tick and I got Lyme disease. What that health situation taught me was what it was really like to be powerless. My body left me, my mental capacity left me, my financial stability left me, everything that I knew left me, and it truly did leave me powerless and feeling very powerless. in order to heal, I had to understand that and really embrace it and be okay with that. And that takes a lot of face-to-face vulnerability with yourself and others. What I eventually did learn was, while I believed in the past I was powerful, it was a false sense of power for me. It was an externally driven sense of power. When I lost everything, I was then able to take a look at everything I was doing. All of the behaviors I was exhibiting was really to prove this false sense of power, because really deep down, my belief about myself was that I was a powerless individual. So luckily, I got the experience of really knowing what powerlessness is, so that I could look at that belief that was driving it, everything that I was doing, to switch it and shift it.
I'm interested, Jenna, in how do you go from that? Like, I imagine this powerhouse of a person, and then physically you're not able to do it. So there's that period of, which you use the word beautifully, embrace. Like, how does one surrender into a new reality? Like, how do you embrace that new reality?
It wasn't pretty. I didn't have a choice, honestly. I was in a place in my life where I'm always hesitant to use the rock bottom, because I think that's used a lot. But when you do reach a certain place with whatever the challenges that you're facing, you really need to look in the mirror. I needed to, in order to start to heal. So what happened for me is I switched from being powerless in a lot of other ways in my life to giving my power over to my disease, my doctors, my ill health. And I had to take a look at that and say, where's my strength and where am I able to come at this situation to really grasp and originally grasp my power back. So for me, it was walking away from the treatment plan that I was on, and it was about no longer being a victim to my disease, and seeing my disease in a different light. So having gratitude for what it did teach me and what it allowed me to learn about myself. So it was really a bit of a dark night of the soul for a period of time, just to take a look in the mirror and see who I really was and what I was portraying outward, and if that was really true to me.
It's interesting, because just before the show we were talking about making sense of a nonsensical world sometimes, and I think you remind me of, when I got diagnosed with my neuropathy, that I was spending so much time becoming my disease. Like, you become it, right? It's like, this is me now. And there's no distinction that, you start to go, as you said, you go into that victim mode, and you go into the why me, and you start to try and make sense of something that's nonsensical. And you spend so much caca time there. And, as soon as you said, like, I don't think yet I've gotten to the place in which I can express gratitude as to the why, but I have gotten into a place of acceptance and making the distinction between I am not my disease. And so therefore I won't let it control certain aspects of my life. Now, you walk this journey, you've now embraced it. Going through, as you said, it's not an easy journey. Walk me through what parts of it were not easy. What were you challenged with the most?
One of the biggest challenges for me, it was switching from being a victim to my disease to having gratitude and seeing my disease as a vehicle for the growth of me as a person. That was probably the stickiest piece for me, because all of the outside information that I was gaining was very victim based. So, you know, this is what it's going to look like, and this is what's going to happen to you, and this is what you can expect in your future, and all of those stories that we can weave around our lives. And it builds, it festers into a place of what's the point? I'm never going to be able to get out of this. I'm never going to be able to shift this. This is who I am. This is just really what it is. And so for me, I had to have the conversation with myself of that. Could this be about something else? Could this experience be about something else? And the moment I asked that question, I was then able to open up and see that for me, my disease was a vehicle of transformation for me. It was, I don't believe I would be the person I am today and doing the things that I do today if I didn't have this experience of Lyme disease. I know it is pivotal to who I am now. So I do have tremendous gratitude for this disease. And I think it's one of my greatest teachers. It's definitely that experience for me that has created the Jenna that's sitting in front of you today. Yeah.
Jenna, quite often I wonder that as many of us go through some sort of a traumatic event that acts as the lightning rod or the stimuli to become who we were always meant to be. It's like you step into from the pseudo person, you step into, this is who I actually was meant to be. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on, and this is going to sound crazy because I've always wondered this, and I think we're in a beautiful place to talk about this. Why is it that we can't get our shit together before that happens? You know what I mean? Like, it's like this, it's every story I hear, there's this climax of this health issue that comes up, or, you know, somebody passing away, or something happens. And quite often I sit back and I think, wow, divinity, like, is this the way humanity is meant to live, where we have to experience something negative or traumatic to, like, why is it that we cannot shift before that happens? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it has a lot to do with what I even do for work now. What I believe is that we come into this world, we're raised in environments, we're raised by certain people, we're nature nurture, we're raised up, and generationally things are passed down to us, belief systems are passed down to us, cultural norms are passed down to us. We start to develop as a person, and we take on this ideology of who we are. And there's certain parts of us that are acceptable, and there's certain parts of us that we've been taught to push down or disown, that aren't acceptable about ourselves. So then we start to live our lives in this way that's the projection of who it is that we're acceptably allowed to be. And that's a pretty comfortable place to be in its own discomfort, because there's things, right? We can feel it. We feel the discomfort, but we're okay. We're relatively okay. We're going to continue to move forward, and we become automated in everything that we're doing. So then things become easier, and our thought process is relatively the same. We have the same experiences generally over this day to this day to this day. And we become really ingrained and committed to who we believe we are. That it's not only, you know, the background of this physically, right? It's not only just a concept, it's also in our physiology. So it's neural pathways, it's all of those things. So it's a physical and mental, emotional, even spiritual space that we can really own. This is who I am. I stick to this. Because of that, I only see certain choices. I only exhibit certain behaviors. I only have certain experiences. I only feel a certain way because I only allow myself to feel a certain way. And we are in it. It's really who we are. a lot of the times we hear the story of someone going through something traumatic because that is what's necessary in order to wake people up sometimes, if they do not have a level of awareness that's willing to question and be curious about themselves and their behavior and how they're exhibiting it. So I think that's why traumatic things usually need to happen in order for people to have this transformational experience, because without those, we aren't really awake. We're robotically moving through life. Now there's different ways so we don't have to have the big trauma, and I think that's why you do what you do and I do what I do, and right, there's people out there looking to serve from this place to bring the awareness before the traumatic experience is necessary. But if we don't have that kind of support, then things it's a shakeup. It's really a wake-up call that happens for a lot of people.
Love it. Love it. So we become so comfortable and robotic that we could easily continue that way if that lightning rod doesn't happen. And I love the way you describe it as a wake-up call, which gives context, right? Because that's exactly what it is, that the way I've been living up to this point is not going to serve my purpose going forward. And so therefore, something happens. So I love that. So the power that you described from before is this very, it sounds like this very masculine energy. It sounds very external to you. It's how you are behaving in the world, how you're being perceived in the world, all of those things. And then when I hear this power, it sounds more internal. It sounds more, this is my stature on the earth. Like it feels like the sumo wrestler strength inside. So walk me through, because I understand the external power, walk me through this internal power thrust.
So one of the easiest ways to recognize that is to watch who you have around you. And especially those people that get under your skin, or you have some sort of emotional reaction to, or even just a level of frustration that happens, because there's parts of us, and this is where true power really resides. There are parts of us that we have been taught or learned through experience to disown and to disengage from, because they're not acceptable pieces to either society or our family or a relationship or work, whatever that looks like. Those pieces of us that really are within us, however, we do not want to recognize or engage with in any way, because we've learned that that's not good, it's bad. And what we do with that is we tend to project that out. So we'll have an experience with someone where, for me, it was anger. So I was never allowed to be overly emotional in my family. That wasn't acceptable. We had to keep our emotions in check and not waste time in those spaces. And one of the biggest places that showed up was in anger. So I wasn't allowed to ever be angry about anything, because that's just the way it was. I need to pull up my bootstraps and I need to just take care of it. So I had an affliction to anger, to anyone around me that was angry. As a child, I would shy away from it. As an adult, I would shy away from it. I would also attract it to me, because those parts of us that we disown, we really are attracting to us to further us along on our journey. So I would find myself in relation, however that looked, with somebody that was angry, and then I would have such a compelling argument against them being angry. Where power comes in, and the true use of power, the moment that I'm able to sit with myself and say, are you an angry person? And get past the first answer, which is always no. Are you really an angry person? Well, yeah, I am angry. Then I feel it and I'm really uncomfortable. But the moment I can bring it up to the surface, it actually loses its power over me. And I can question it in a space that says, are there places in my life that anger can serve me? Anger is a very powerful emotion. Are there places in my life that I can use anger in order to promote whatever it is I'm trying to promote for myself if you will. The minute I brought anger up to the surface and I accepted that there is a part of me that's an angry person, it lost all of its steam. So I was no longer attracting people into my life that were angry. I was no longer having a reaction to someone sitting in a boardroom that was angry. So I was then able to stay within myself in those moments and not lose any part of me. That's the power I'm talking about now.
So you're saying that the internal power rests in some level of emotional intelligence, of understanding what my triggers are, what's going on for me, but actually naming it and saying, you know, that this is anger and I see you and I hear you and you are not going to control me, but I do recognize and embrace you.
And it does lose. I'm no longer trying to stuff my own, in this situation we're using anger, stuff my own anger down, because that's using energy. The moment I'm trying not to be something, I'm putting energy into that, which takes energy away from other things that I could be pouring it into. So it's a distraction that's happening for us. And we're moving through our lives so driven to not be those things that we really are. And it's okay, because the only reason that it's bad is because we've labeled it as bad. I always say it's not good or bad, it just is. And I always say we do what we do until we don't have to. We don't have to when we shine some light on it. We don't have to stay in it. That's the fear. A lot of people feel, and I did feel also, with the powerlessness. So for me to sit and say, okay, are you powerless, Jenna? Well, yeah, I am. And this is how I can prove it to you. And that's really uncomfortable. But
Jenna, stringed through what you're saying, I'm hearing a lot of self-talk. So let's rest into self-talk for a moment. And I'd love to hear your views on self-talk. So everything that goes on inside, because everything is pearled, everything you've talked about your journey, it seems as though there was a lot of self-talk going on, a lot of self-questioning, self-reflection. So walk me through your views on self-talk.
Having, for me, in my personal experience, having a life where everything was external to me and all of my behaviors were driven externally, and making the switch to being driven internally, so those parts of me, all of me, encompassing all of me and bringing that forward, it does take a great deal of self-monitoring first and foremost, I would say, because we have so many thoughts a day, 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day. 95% of those thoughts are the same thoughts we had yesterday and the day before and the day before, and 75% of those thoughts are negative towards ourselves. So we are having this internal battle all of the time within us, but we're not recognizing what it is. So we're really creating who we be based on the self-talk that's coming at us. So it began for me in monitoring that and just recognizing what it is that I'm saying to myself, and especially those things that I say to myself all the time. And where did they come from? And were they even mine in the first place? Or were they, my mother's that she handed to me? And really that curiosity of taking a look at the self-talk that we already have, that we're already doing, just to understand it a little bit more and really see what's driving it, what's behind it, where did it come from, is it mine? Most of my self-talk wasn't even mine. It was passed down to me and I just owned it. It's like wearing a shirt that's too tight. And you just feel like agitated and, because it's not yours. It's not your shirt. That's what I seen self-talk as, until we can monitor it and be aware of it, and then make the choice to change it.
Jenna, this inner journey that you talk about, right? That inner processing seems like a lot of work. You know, in this day and age, I find people want quick fixes to things. You know, they want somebody to just tell them what to do. And they, you know, it's almost like we live in this era of everything needs to, we have this perception that everything needs to be quick. And I find that when I'm dealing with clients, one of the very fascinating things that I face every day is the speed at which they think the inner journey must occur. So I would love to hear from you about that inner journey. Love to hear your view on something where people believe that it needs to be a quick fix. Like, walk us through your perception of the speed in which we transition.
So initially, I felt it would be long and arduous and not really looking forward to it in any way. And then I stopped and I looked at some of the behaviors that I was exhibiting out in order to numb this whole avoidance thing down. So the quick fix in my mind is equivalent to someone using something outside of themselves to numb themselves in order to feel better for a short period of time, which actually exacerbates the issue behind it. What I know now is it does not have to be this arduous walking through the trudging mud, dark night of the soul that I used to think that it was. Because the moment we just bring in some light to anything, the power it has over us diminishes and it gets easier. So it's not about saying, oh, I'm an angry person, that's really ugly and uncomfortable. You can shift out of that rather quickly. If you think about emotions, is energy and motion, right? Those are just things trying to come up to the surface so that they can dismantle themselves, if you will, or shift in some way. So I think about it from that perspective. It doesn't have to be a place where we sit in and stay in a defeat, victimish kind of style. If we're truly trying to promote ourselves, our body and our brain, and we're just allowing things to bubble up to the surface so that they can move, I don't see it as a need to be that much of a dark night of the soul. If we can catch it before the big wake-up call, that's harder, right?
Of course, of course. So, Jenna, you have now journeyed. You're journeying from, this is what I used to be, something happens, I'm no longer that person, I've now redefined who I am, through that process of self-inquiry, you know, self-realization, and the story and the journey inside of who you are and what you want to impact in the world. And it's, you know, you have now the elixir of what you want to bring to the world. And so walk me through what was in your hands as the elixir as you started to expose yourself to the world in a different way.
The first thing that's popping up is I am able. That's a quite a big statement for me and for a lot of other people. Is what is currently happening, whatever it is not necessarily the outcome of your future, right? It's, we are able, we have the capacity to shift in any way we're looking to shift into, with that time and energy. We are able. I think that's one of the biggest things for me, to come from that place of I am able.
Walk me through a little bit more on that. So walk me through what you would say to me if I sit in the statement of I am unable.
Mm-hmm. So the first thing is to dive into that. That is a belief, right? So that is something that you believe. We'll use you as an example. You believe about yourself, and that is something that you really drives your life on an undercurrent that may not be recognized. So just questioning it, being very curious about it, and where'd you get that belief? Where did it come from? How was it built? And how does it currently display in your life? And when we are curious about it, it loses some of its power over us. It loses some of the grip that it has, even if we're not recognizing it in the moment, it still has a grip over us. So highly curious moments for us where we can really pay attention with awareness is a key ingredient to this. And it's usually a starting point, because when we dive into it, where did that come from? Well, it came from, whatever that is for the individual. Okay, was it yours? And what if you really are? What if you really are unable? What would that look like? So just having this investigative curiosity to the behaviors that you exhibit can be quite a direction shifter.
Interesting. So when you're working with your clients, what have been some of the top presentations to you? Like, how do they present themselves to you? Do they present themselves with a health issue? Do they present themselves with something, some caca that's just happened in their life? Walk me through the person that sits in front of Jenna and says, I need your help.
Mm-hmm. So it's usually individuals that have stepped into a level of success, whatever you want to put on that word, in their lives. So they're not looking for a new label or a new role or a new identity in any way from the outside. So it's not an externally driven. It's an individual that feels like something is missing, like they are tamped down in some way, or they're having conflict with people around them. Because the conflict around us is really valuable for us to pay attention to. So it's an individual that is looking to let go of some of the behaviors that they're exhibiting, whether they be a numbing behavior, whether they be a behavior within the workplace that they're having concerns with. Somebody that has gained the status that they're looking for, but they're looking to be more of a mentor, more of an individual that can have an impact on the people around them.
I hear the word, when we started the interview, you said the word powerless. And so I hear that in that string that you just said around somebody feeling that they have a perception of, due to whatever it is, some limiting belief, that they're feeling powerless in moving forward in their life. And they're in this stuck place, in this rut place.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I would agree completely. And while from the outside they look perhaps like they do have quite a bit of power, there's still this undercurrent of not really stepping into all of who they are and being able to lead from that fashion. So there is a level of feeling a little bit powerless in what's next. How do I, bring myself forward more instead of the perception of who I believe I need to be.
Jenna, in your work to the world, what totally lights up your heart? Like, what gives you the greatest joy where you're like, yeah, man, I'm living?
It's when someone steps into their own sense of being and is grounded in who they are, there is an energy shift in them. There is their being looks different. They'll hear things from people that say, have you done your hair? Have you lost weight? There's something different about you. I love that, because what that is that is an energetic shift in the person. And they have shed parts of themselves that they have projected forward for so long, and which has exhausted them. So they have a new sense of energetic power in everything they do, and I adore that. I love seeing that in people, and you can see the shift in that space. That's the thing for me. That's it.
Love it, love it, love it. And Jenna, what do you always take seriously? Like when you think of this in life should be taken seriously, is there anything in your life that you take seriously?
I take people's stories seriously because they're very invested in them, and they are very important to people. While my role is to help them shift out of the story, I take their story very seriously because it's theirs. It's theirs, and they put a lot of time and energy building it. So I have great compassion for that. I have great compassion for people and their stories, wherever they are. It doesn't matter to me what the story is. I take people's stories very seriously, not only because it gives me a great deal of information in the work I do, but it's also theirs. It's very precious. It's very precious. And it's opportunistic. I am an opportunistic person. So for me, someone's story brings to me the opportunity for opening, the opportunity for shifts. So
Nice.
Stories I take very seriously, yeah.
How beautiful, because as you said, we are so vested in those stories, right? Like we think our story is who we are. And I remember when I started to detach myself from my stories, it was interesting. I was in this session with my friend Tina, who does core story work, and she said to me, she said, Jivi, how does that detachment feel for you? And I said to her, I said, I feel that without my stories, then I'm standing naked in New York Square and totally vulnerable because I've got nothing on, like there's no more story, and all these people are whizzing by me and walking, and some of them are laughing, some of them think it's funny that I'm standing there stark naked, but that's how vulnerable I felt as I started to strip away the stories. So I'm feeling gratitude in this moment to say thank you for taking that seriously, because I think, you know, as a person, there's a vulnerability attached to not being attached to a story anymore. There's a beauty, like I'm able to now detach quicker and quicker from, I know the story that's playing, so I can detach quicker and quicker, but that has not come easy, that's for sure.
And our story is beautiful in itself because it's us. Right?
Yeah.
It's all of those parts of us that are intertwined like a spider web. There's beauty in that. It's a beautiful thing. And to be held dear. And it's also an opportunity to open up.
So Jenna, what in the world, like from a worldly perspective, what totally gets your knickers in a knot?
It's an interesting question to me because maybe even 6 months ago, I would have answered it differently. I'm not going to say what I would have said because that was 6 months ago.
Yeah.
When I look at something and it gets my knickers in a knot, it's an opportunity for me to take a look at me. What about that situation gets my knickers in a knot? And that doesn't mean that I don't care about what's happening and what happens. I'm a very compassionate individual, and I'm very empathic. I feel a lot. I always try to start with looking at myself and what about, there's so much in this world that we could be quite upset about. I always try to start with myself and what about me is having an emotional reaction to this. That's my first and foremost. One of the big things for me is people belittling other people. Mm. I really do take that seriously. My kids will tell you I have this very straightforward, strict rule about speaking down about another person. Mm. Because it has nothing to do with the other person. It's just our projection of our own self on those people. And I don't believe that others have that right, if you will, to belittle another person. That's probably my biggest that I respond to in a way. And yeah, there's lots we could talk about with that one, but yeah, I think it's that. It's the and because for me, one of my main beliefs most of my life was I wasn't good enough. Mm. So when another person treats another person like they're not good enough, I get quite invested.
Interesting. Well, I'd love to, let's just dissect what gets my knickers in a knot, because I want people to experience working with you as to how one processes something, because what's really relevant in everything that you've said is that internal processing. Mm-hmm. It's that process of, who am I in this situation and how do I look at it? So what totally gets my knickers in a knot is spiritual gurus, mentors, coaches, healers taking advantage of people's vulnerability. So where people are in a vulnerable place, maybe they're struggling with their relationship, they're struggling with their career or finances, and then you've got, this spiritual leader, thought leader, whatever you want to call them, but in a place of a healing place. And they are out and out taking advantage of that person's vulnerability. So let's process that for a moment. So how would you help me go deeper into my knickers in a knot situation?
Well, the key word there that pops up for me is vulnerability. So what is it that's uncomfortable to you about vulnerability?
It comes back to New York Square. It comes back to exposure. It comes back to being raw. It comes back to probably even a little bit of credibility in exposure, because the more vulnerable I may be, the more open I'm being for judgment. That's what it is. The more vulnerable I am, the more I open myself up to judgment.
And judgment is, how do you feel about judgment? What's the idea you have around judgment?
It comes back to actually what you were saying about your knickers in a knot situation, where I don't feel as human beings we have any right to judge anyone else because we don't know their shtick. Like, we don't know their story. We haven't walked in their shoes. We don't know what things have come together to make that person who they are. So my thoughts, my ideas around that are, we as human beings just have no right to judge another person, regardless of what they're doing or not doing.
Mm-hmm. And so it would be interesting to discover the different places where you have felt judgment from another, and those experiences for you, right? To process that a little bit for yourself, in those times where you have been judged, and how that portrayed itself to you, and what it brought up for you and how it felt for you. So a big part of this self-discovery is really in having conversations with ourselves. So those times when you have felt judgment and you having compassion for another individual and they're being judged is driven by your own sense of the word and your own experience with that. So in my work, it would be giving the opportunity for you to understand that in those times that did happen in your world.
I'm kind of blown away right now, Jenna, because the word judgment has surrounded me my entire life. Like, as soon as you said that about where I felt judged, so I went through a disownment with my family. And so I felt that I felt judged. I felt people judged me even without knowing what was going on for me. They didn't know the full story. So when you go through a disownment from your family, you're right. You know, it was that feeling of I'm not connected to anything, I'm not connected to anyone anymore. And that connection is based on an incorrect judgment. So even as you were saying that, when you said, when you look back, the greatest devastation, the greatest trauma that's occurred in my life is that disownment. And yet I have this innate feeling that disownment was based on wrongful judgment. So what a fascinating experience. Like, I don't even know what to say right now. I was a bit dumbfounded as I was processing that.
And that's the whole, so that piece right there really is a main driver for you in how you be in this world. So just being in that space that you just expressed, you brought that to the light. It does no longer has to have the direct impact on you that it perhaps has had in the past. Because if judgment was no longer good or bad, it just was, and you are able to use that in any way. There are times in our lives where we judge. There's times in our lives we have these very large experiences in our lives. I see the experiences in our lives as the vehicle in order for us to shift, to shift that. And if you shifted that piece around judgment, what kind of energy would you then have to use?
Oh my gosh, Jen, I just had another mind-blowing moment. Oh my gosh, you're so freaking amazing. I'll tell you what my mind-blowing moment is that I am judging those spiritual healers. So not only am I, oh my freaking God, Jenna, I'm doing the exact very thing that I despise. How insane is that? Like, as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like, I'm judging those spiritual healers, those people, that bucket of people that I think prey on people's vulnerability. I am judging them. And I don't know them from a personal level. Like, I don't know what happens in their home life. I don't know. Holy crap. I just had a what the fuck moment. So I just thought I'll just say that. Because I have these WTF moments in my life, and this was just one of them.
If I counted how many times I hear that one statement, because for me in my journey, having those aha moments, like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Shift. It just happened. You just brought it to the surface. It no longer has the same control over you. And you can laugh at it like, wow. That's the beauty of this. That's the beauty of it. It's so beautiful.
Yeah,
that right there, that shift, that's what my juice right there.
Because you do, it's the acceptance that I'm doing exactly what I don't like in other people. And that's a different level of self-accountability. Oh my word.
And you're doing it because it's what you know. We do what we know until we don't have to.
True enough. True enough. Well, that was a magical moment, Jenna. Well, Jenna, oh my word! Like first of all, I'm just sitting with what I'm sitting with right now because I am sitting in that mind blowing what the fuck moment. Um, and I want to say to you in closing, if you knew the entire world was listening to Jenna right now, and you could say something to every single person that's listening, what would you say?
First thing that came to my mind was, you're okay. You're okay. We're okay. And I understand how that can feel to some listening to this that are in situations where they don't feel okay. But the moment that you just had is what makes it you're okay. Because that's your power. You just stepped into it. And you're okay.
Beautiful.
We really are powerful. We're way more powerful than we ever give ourselves credit for. We are okay, just as we are.
Love it. Thank you, Jenna. I'm sitting here in a place of honor that we're friends. I just am feeling blessed that we came into each other's lives because I just love you.
It's mutual. It's so mutual.
Well, Jenna, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with our audience. We'll post all of your information underneath this video so that people know how to get a hold of you and get in contact with you, especially if they're feeling that place of, you know, where they're feeling powerless because something or another has triggered their life. And they're feeling in that place of caca, rut, whatever we want to call it, but that really stinky place where we don't feel that there's a solution or a way out. So thank you so much for being on the show, Jenna.
Oh, my pleasure. Yes, I adore you. So it is my honor to spend this time with you. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, folks, so I hope that you guys have gotten some really awesome tips about getting your power back. As I said, Jenna's information will all be available underneath this video, so do not hesitate to give her a ring. As you guys know, I bring people on this show that I completely trust. And so therefore, you know that anybody that comes on this show has that level of credibility and trust. So if you trust me, then you trust my guest. So please feel free to connect with Jenna as you need. And otherwise, have a fantabulous weekend. And over the weekend, ask yourself that question about, is there a power leak? And how can you gain that power back? And then if you have the answer to that, then give Jenna a call. All right, guys, take care. Bye.